Hello everyone and welcome. Today I want to bring back a series that I really enjoyed in the past where I talk about old creepypastas that no one but me remembers because why not? I've got some good, some bad, even a lightning round in here. So if you want to hear me, a grown man, ramble unhingedly about stories written by what I only assume were like 14-year-olds from 10 years ago, then stick around and watch. Also, this is like a series now. I think this is part 5. So go watch some of the earlier ones if you want. Peek your fancy at them, take a look. I still want to do a whole episode of this that's purely dedicated to viewer submission. So if you have some stories that only you remember, then by all means let me know because I would love to talk about them. Oh, and spoiler alert for like 10-year-old creepypastas. And we're going to start off with a classic that I personally love, Doors. A very simple story. It's about a young fellow who's adopted by a very loving family, including the mom named Janice, who loves our protagonist very much, his dad Richard, who didn't really care for him, and his loving big sister and best friend Emily. Well, one night the family returns from a church event, and while our protagonist and Emily are watching their favorite TV show about animals, our protagonist notices that something is off, and he's seeing something out of the corner of his eye outside. Later that night, someone breaks in, kills Dad. Our protagonist meets the invader, but can't stop him from taking Janice as well. The invader then sees Emily, who our protagonist just couldn't save as the invader takes her off into the night. But our protagonist couldn't save her because he was injured or too small. It's because he has paws and cannot open doors. And that's the story. It's a good and short one. What I really like about the story is the twist ending where the protagonist is a dog. It's not super obvious until the end when the home invader sees the dog and doesn't do anything to him except for give him a few pats before he leaves. And while I like the twist of the story being that it's told through a dog's perspective, I also don't like it because I feel like any dog, no matter how big or small, would defend the home and attack the invader. And even then, in the story, the dog talks about how he is bigger than Emily, so I don't know. I kind of always perceived that Emily was maybe 13, 14 years old, and this was a larger dog, like a German Shepherd maybe. So I don't see any reason why this dog wouldn't have actually tried to attack. I mean, I grew up with dogs of all sizes in the house, and they all know how to sniff out someone's not supposed to be there and will defend the home. So I feel like the dog in this story should have at least tried to attack. I don't know, lunge at him, bite his ankles, do something. But regardless of that, for what it is, this is a really good story. Next, we have a story originally posted on the X Paranormal board from 4chan, and a really long one, The Tale of the Anasazi's Goat Man. Anazi. It's the Goat Man story from 4chan. It starts out with our protagonist stating, "Be me, from Chicago, going to visit cousins in Alabama," which is perfect because one, nothing good ever happens in Alabama, and two, this place is just full of weird shit. I live in Alabama. I know it's weird. Our protagonist goes camping with his cousins in the boonies, and they come across this guy and his kid who warn them that there's some kind of big animal out in the woods. The kids don't really pay him any mind, but the guy who warns him, his son goes and hangs out with them. You got like 11 or 12 kids. They spend the day having fun camping and enjoying themselves when the kid, Tanner, our protagonist's cousin Rooster, and some girl go to Tanner's house to see if his dad is cool with them, camping out with their group for the night. All seems well until that night there's a blood smell in the air, and Rooster, Tanner, and the girl come running back to the camp like a bat out of hell and straight into a trailer. Once everyone piles in, because, naturally you're going to follow the people running like their life depends on it, Tanner explains that a few days ago something had eaten about half a pig on his family's farm, but they didn't really think anything of it. However, on their way back to the camp, something was following them in the woods. One of the cousins starts going on that it's the Goat Man stalking them, but they just dismiss it and they don't need an urban legend right now. They don't need to be more scared than normal. They keep saying, "Oh no, it's just some hicks out here messing with us." Then our protag kind of breaks the continuity of the story real quick and thinks back to when they were in college and how one of his roommates was from the Menominee tribe and told him the story of the Goat Man. It's a Wendigo-like creature that likes to stalk and harass groups of people just for fun. And it's even believed that it's bad to talk about them, and even worse if you see them. But getting back to the story, they noticed that the smell had been in the air and it just vanishes. It doesn't get weaker or steadily dissipate over time, it just gone. Thinking nothing of it, the group starts, they start to calm down, they stay camping for another day, and then the next night, that smell comes back. When the smell returns, they rush back into the cabin that night, and they decide, we're going to cook some brats, when they notice there's an extra person there. They rush out and get a head count, and they verify that there was in fact an extra person in the cabin. Then the boys arm up with some sticks, and they decide to go clear it before, there was nothing in there. Following morning, the group is split on if this is just some sick game that someone's pulling on or a legit thing, and they need to leave. Obviously, a lot of them are like, no, we need to get out of here. This is how horror movies start. This includes Kira, the girl who was with Tanner and Rooster the first night, who she leaves, but, some others stay. Our protag, who wanted to leave, is forced to stay as he's the one with the keys and responsible for locking everything up. He spends the day trying to convince everyone else, like, hey guys, there's some kind of monster out here. We need to leave. And the only reason why he stopped is because Tanner, the kid who they met, on their way to the woods, decided, I'm going to go home and get a gun. So that kind of, eased the tensions and everything like that. And then that night, they see Kira, the same girl that left, that morning, sitting out by the fire while everyone else is inside. Everyone thinks that Anon and Kira are just kind of playing a joke on them until one of the girls decides to go and comfort her and realize that, it's not her. So they lock up the trailer and they keep an eye, outside on whatever it is that's out there. And they do that until Tanner returns with the rifle and says his cousin is coming with another weapon and that they would all leave soon once he got there with a vehicle. Tanner said that the girl was not Kira and made no thought of her until it didn't really pass his mind walking by her until he realized it was steadily getting closer to him as he reached the trailer. And as the night goes on, a fight breaks out because one of the girls just snaps and is just so convinced that it's a joke. It's just a sick joke someone's playing on him. And that just keeps going until Tanner's cousin comes in and says that he saw the same girl on the trail and that she was following him slowly but couldn't keep up. Some time passes and something is knocking on the door and asking to be let in an inhuman manner. Not so much like the, let me in, like, guys, come on, open the door, more like the, open, in, fucker, like that. After some time and Tanner's cousin just kind of shooting out into the woods, the Goatman noise stops. But just before they got there, Tanner mentioned that he had noticed that there was an extra person who had looked him dead in the eyes before walking back into the woods. And that's the story. I love it. This is probably the most real creepypasta out there to me. Because you gotta remember, at a time, the point was, make it believable. And what I love about this story is it's presented in a way that it's not something wild. The story is very much read as if, you're sitting at a bar, or, you're just hanging out with some friends at, their house, and, you're all just sharing ghost stories. And this is one of your friends' stories that they wholeheartedly believe and know for a fact happened to them. I can see myself hanging out with someone and them telling me the story just as a matter of fact. Not like, oh yeah, this happened to my friend's cousin. Nah, dude, this happened to me, and I swear to you, this is exactly what happened. And that's why I love it, because I have stories like that I tell. And this is in the same manner, and that's why it's so great. And despite it being a creepypasta and originating from Xboard, where a lot of creepypastas are originally posted, I don't know if this is fake or not. I mean, Alabama is full of weird shit. And I'm not one to go out and try to find something like this and figure out if it's real or not, but despite how long-winded my summary of the story is, I actually didn't tell the whole thing and left a good chunk out. I would wholeheartedly encourage you to go and read it for yourself or listen to an audio version, because it's terrifying and believable at the same time. It's definitely one of the best stories you can go and listen to. But now we move on to, I don't know if that was fake, to, yeah bro, that didn't happen, with Where the Bad Kids Go. Our story starts with the protagonist remembering growing up in Lebanon during a war and watching an odd show that was used to scare children into obedience that would always end by showing a shot of a door with a text saying, "That's where the bad kids go." We cut to present day, and our protagonist is a journalist and has discovered where the show was filmed. Though abandoned and burned, they had found the door where the bad kids go. Inside they find blood, bones, and a microphone in there. And that's it. The story is actually a lot shorter than I remember it being, with it only being like a 5-minute read. I wouldn't call it the best. I feel like it's missing a little something. It's a little rushed, but in terms of I don't know where, I would just kind of would have liked to see more, because like, oh, the government tortured people here during the war, scary. I don't know, it left me wanting more. It wasn't bad, it was just like, this seems like a good start to a story though. You know, it's that, like, that's it. I want more. I don't know what I want more of though, but I know I want more from this. But enough of that one. We have one I remember being terrifying, the Harbinger experiment, which starts out with talking about how much we as a species have overcome, advanced, and defeated, but our quest for knowledge will be our downfall, and if that's not pretentious, I don't know what it is. Then we get the, I promise this is real, it's not just a spooky story, I witnessed this, and I'm immediately taken out of it, because there's no better way to ruin the immersion of your story than to be aware that you're posting it to a forum and that people won't believe you. It's like, come on, dude, like, come on. There's something else you could say. And yeah, I like the Nazi's Goatman story, but that doesn't constantly refer to how it's posted on 4chan and how no one would believe it. It's literally written like a dude who's sharing his scary real story when a group of friends are all sharing theirs. Whereas this is not. This is written like an actual story. When you make mention of how no one will believe your story because of how you present it, it kind of sucks the believability out of it for me. You come off as one of those nut jobs on AM Coast to Coast, not a survivor of true horror, if that makes sense. Anyway, so we get the setup of a doctor in the 70s named Zimmerman getting ready for a research project known as the Harbinger experiment, and how he has a real nasty, ruthless dude. Mostly because he sets up his experiments in a bunker in bumfuck Alaska during the winter. Now, I don't know if any of y'all have ever been to Alaska, but I hear it gets kind of cold up there. And lo and behold, the deranged scientist who has an evil bad guy name is a mad lad that wants to bring metaphysical creatures into our world. And who would have guessed? I know. And who would have also guessed that his plan worked and the thing he brought into the world isn't friendly? You don't say metaphysical creatures from another dimension aren't nice? It even sings the Tiny Tim song, you know, the one from the first episode of SpongeBob and Insidious. And our story ends with our narrator being the only one to escape and lock the door behind himself, warning that if you're ever, for whatever reason, in the Alaska wilderness and see a bunker playing the Jellyfish Rave, do not open it. Also, the creature escapes somehow and is on its way to our protag. And that was the Harbinger experiment. It's something. I don't know, like, I like that it has like the Thing feel to it, but it's really long and full of detail, which I mean, that's a good and bad thing, and I mean like a lot of detail, and it's a very long build-up. I did not care for the ending of this thing escaping, however. Not only did I not like that, but the I'm about to die and this literal interdimensional monster from my past is going to get me, better post about it on Reddit for some karma cliche is just, it's not good. Like, I don't feel like that's an appropriate response to facing death, if you ask me. It's one thing to recount it as like, I'm on my deathbed and I need to get this like off my conscience. That's one thing. I feel like if you could easily reword this story into someone saying like, hey, I went to go visit, you know, my grandma or my grandpa on their deathbed, and this is what they confessed to me. That would have made the story way better in my mind, as opposed to, you know, someone confessing it as they're about to die, like on like a computer. But I mean, other than that, I mean, it's not terrible. It's kind of boring. Well, bit of a boring story, but not a bad story. All right, now that nerds are all that's left, let's get into the lightning round. Tulpa, classic creepy one about a dude who makes an imaginary version of himself and it turns out to be a dick. Classic and interesting. I love when people play with pseudoscience to make horror a certified hood classic. How to play hide and seek alone. Tells you how to let a demon possess a doll and play hide and seek with it. One of, if not the first ritual pasta I came across, it was either this or the Midnight Game, I can't remember which one. Either way, it's a fun idea for a challenge. It's not too dangerous or too easy. It's something that you could, in theory, at least try, but I won't because I'm too much of a baby to risk it. The Ed, Edd and Eddy theory says the cul-de-sac is purgatory and all the kids died over a 100-year period. I know I said I hate last episode CreepyPasta's, but this is different. One of the first I ever saw, and I remember hearing this back in like 2011, and it blew my mind. Like, these theories are always fun and a way to look at a show, even if most of them are stupid. And is this one stupid? Yes, but it's also a fun way to look at the show. Polybius, one of the oldest and most OG stories about an addictive arcade cabinet that the government used for a psyop. Honestly, I believe Polybius was a real game, but wasn't what people think. I mean, the internet has just over-exaggerated and warped it into some kind of sinister legend and a fucked up game of telephone. But I think it was just a shitty game that didn't work out too well. Alright, lightning round over. And with that, we begin our last story, one I actually briefly mentioned in the first episode of this series titled Lost Episode by Slime Beast. And it's actually funny because after I made that first video, I kind of gaslit myself into thinking that this was not a real story. It was a fever dream, I made the whole thing up, it's not real. And then I ended up watching Dylan the Night Owl's like 17-hour long Lost Episode Creepypasta video, and he talked about it in that. And I was like, oh snap. Maybe I didn't make that up. Maybe it was a real thing. And the story is pretty simple. Our narrator reflects on a childhood friend named Sid who would fix movies. Initially, Sid started with removing sadder parts of movies, like changing the ending of Old Yeller so the dog doesn't die. But eventually, our protagonist talks him into doing more devious things. Specifically, like cutting the original Star Wars trilogy into one long tape and adding so many edits and changes that even George Lucas would want Sid to stop. And Sid would do a mix of selling his tapes as just a bit of shock horror comedy or what have you, YouTube poops, whatever term you want to use, and sneak him into video stores just for a good cheap laugh on unsuspecting customers. But over time, his edits got a bit too dark, causing him and our protagonist to become estranged. Some years go by and Protag comes across an article talking about urban legends of lost episodes and disturbing edits of shows that they just know it's Sid's work. If not Sid himself, then people inspired by Sid. And naturally, our Protag investigates to find Sid's childhood home dilapidated, with not only Sid, but his parents dead inside as well. And with Sid's body being long dead and wired to a TV with parts of metallicness infused into him, and a perfect caricature of him being on TV is shown, with the story ending there. And while I didn't care for the ending, mostly the decay of Sid's home and how long he and his parents were there dead, it's my mind naturally goes to, someone would have noticed. Someone would have noticed the smell, called the cops because they hadn't seen any of them in a while, or, a squatter would have found it. Just something would have happened. Someone would have noticed. Because there's no point in the story where it says they live in a remote area. But that also gets back to the larger thing of, while I like Slime Beast's work, I do have an issue with how he ends his stories. And that wasn't his worst ending, but it definitely wasn't his best. And regardless, I still like this story. I mean, it's a good one. It's weird because I don't like Lost Episode Creepypastas. Because... Mishka. It's weird because I don't like Lost Episode Creepypastas because of their reuse of the same tropes and then just not being scary to me. I don't know. I don't find SpongeBob was a dick and Bart was mangled on the floor dead scary. But I, for some reason, appreciate the idea of explaining why there are so many of these creepy edits of shows, with it being linked back to some weird kid. It's a weird appreciation for the Y factor, I guess? But all in all, I mean, I'm just glad this story wasn't a fever dream and I didn't make the whole thing up. But hey, with that being said, I mean, this is the end of the video. It was a nice, short, little, quick one, just kind of talking about some stuff. If you stuck around, I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. It really does mean a lot to me. Subscribe if you want. We're doing stuff now. Yeah, I've got a couple videos lined up. There's one I want to do on an old Slenderman ARG series. There might be two. I'm not sure yet. We'll see how the first one goes. And then I kind of want to talk about like the history of horror video games. And again, leave a comment, let me know what stories you remember from creepypastas, like way back in the day, that I kind of, I would love to hear about them, look into them, talk about them and everything like that. And again, just thanks for watching. I hope you have a good day. I love you, and bye-bye.